Have you ever tried explaining the sport of triathlon to a non-triathlete? Difficult, right? And even worse still, have you ever tried explaining the bike leg of a triathlon to a cyclist? Yeah, it's non-drafting, but yeah, I know they're in like a pace line, but it's not a pace line. Yeah, I know there's a drafting benefit, but it's non-drafted. What on earth? I'm Daniel, I'm a huge fan of the sport of triathlon and have been for many years. I take part in them myself at a much lower level than what I spectate at, but I think professional triathlon needs to make a big change and it needs to make it now. And given that I have a YouTube channel, I thought what better thing to do than to put a video together about it. But I am interested in your thoughts and opinions, so please do let me know what they are in the comment section down below and hit like and subscribe while you're at it. Thanks very much. So let's get straight to it. I think that the drafting rules in middle and long distance triathlon should be changed and that it should be draft legal, i.e. no minimum gap between bikes on the bike leg in triathlon. But please hear me out. I've got a lot of reasons as to why I think it's the right thing to do. So for those that perhaps don't know, different race organisers operate with different non-drafting rules. So World Triathlon Short Course operate, you can draft as much as you like, you ride around in a pack. Ironman operate a 12 metre rule, so there has to be 12 metres between bikes. Challenge operate a 20 metre rule, so 20 metre between bikes, and then the T100 also operate a 20 metre rule, so you must maintain 20 metres between bikes and you can ride a time trial and triathlon bike in that position. So to be clear, my opinion is that I think that organisers should remove the requirement to have any sort of gap between bikes on the bike leg, and they should also mandate that you have to ride a conventional road bike, so drop bars, not time trial bars. So even from the outset, I think that the description of those middle and long distance races, so Ironman, Challenge, T100, is incorrect. They're described as non-drafting races, whereas actually they are drafting races, but there's just a minimum distance between bikes required. It's fairly well known and well documented by pro athletes and amateurs that when you're 12 meters behind somebody on a bike, particularly with the speeds in triathlon getting so much faster now, there is a significant benefit, and even more when you're further down the line in aerodynamic gains. And that's fine, they're not cheating, they're staying within the rules, but there is that benefit there. So in my mind, I see those races as draft legal, asterisk 12 meters or asterisk 20 meters, because there is a draft benefit. So my proposal isn't that the races are changed to draft legal, it's that the drafting distance is reduced to essentially zero. Now I have several different areas to go through, but I come at this as purely as a fan and as a spectator, a consumer of triathlon content, a buyer of triathlon goods. I won't for a second pretend that I'm anywhere near good enough to be speaking on behalf of professional triathletes. So if you are one of those and want to offer up your opinion, please do feel free to comment in the comment section down below. So from my point of view, years and years ago, long course triathlon, so middle distance and long distance, was something that short distance athletes did perhaps towards the end of their career, or perhaps they're struggling with injuries or not that competitive at short distance, whatever the reason being. It always seemed to be that athletes would progress onto the middle and long distance. Perhaps their strengths and weaknesses, tee them up for better performances over those distances. It's only more recently that we've seen athletes starting their careers in middle and long distance, which has of course taken the standard up considerably. But I've always felt like I'm following this one sport of triathlon, but then I'm following this parallel of draft legal and non-draft legal in two different areas, and that the athletes never really overlapped. So you're almost following two different worlds of what I thought was the same sport. Now, more recently, we have seen athletes, particularly from the short course, go across to the long course. It's never really gone the other way around. Athletes such as Taylor Knibb, Julie Duran, the Norwegian crew, Yeli Geens, Hayden Wild, all of those that we've seen, and they've absolutely rocked the boat in the long distance world and been very, very competitive. And that is essentially what I think this would enable, more of that to happen. So I think that one of the main factors preventing these short course athletes from coming across into the middle and long distance world is the actual bike that you ride. Now, most of them have sponsors. It's not physically getting hold of the bike that is the problem, but it's riding on a time trial bike. It's getting used to the position. It's getting used to the different physiological requirements from a longer distance and less surgy in some cases effort. However, I asked Alex Yee in 2023.
Short course scene and maybe moving towards the long course. I don't know if I'll be part of that yet. I definitely would love to. First of all, I need a TT bike. So
yeah,
that's the first stage.
We're so silly,
I think that'll be a bit messy otherwise. But yeah, I'd definitely be interested in the PTO distance. I think is hopefully one that would suit me. So yeah.
I don't think it'd be a problem him getting a TT bike, but what he means is he hasn't ridden one, hasn't touched one, hasn't needed to, because of the racing he's been doing hasn't required that. So he couldn't just go, oh yeah, in a couple of weeks I'm going to try a slightly different distance. He's having to invest time into, okay, I'm going to ride a different bike, get used to that, get used to potentially different race dynamics, and it's just that far away from what he's currently been doing, like he's less likely to do it, right? I'm sure there's different requirements in terms of what training you need to do, but especially in 2024, we've seen athletes dip in and out of different distances with a lot of success. I think we're at the point where they're all swim, bike, running a lot, operating at such a high level that they are able to, to dance around a bit more. So the bike is a big problem. So therefore, removing the drafting distance, allowing road bikes only, would mean that we would get to see the big stars of triathlon, the whole sport of triathlon, come together and race each other more often. So the actual race dynamics themselves then. So triathlon is often described, or middle and long distance, as an individual time trial effort. The best athlete wins. If you're the strongest and fastest, you'll win. I don't think that's always the case. I think with the benefits at 12 and 20 meters drafting on the bike, the pack dynamics do play a big part into that, and I love that. So, for example, the Ironman 70.3 World Championships 2024 in Taupo, New Zealand. So the women's race. So Taylor Knibb breaks away on the bike, and she rode pretty much the whole thing solo. We then had Kat Matthews and Imogen Simmons behind, chasing, working together, benefiting from that 12-meter draft zone completely legally, and then a chase group and various other things happening behind them. Now, Taylor Knibb was able to stay away, like a breakaway. Kat and Imogen were able to put time into the group behind them and then come off the bike second and third, having worked together. And I think that's a great example of like pack and team dynamics. On the men's side, we saw a bigger lead group, and again, it looked like they worked together, benefited from drafting at 12 meters completely legally, stayed away from the chase group. Nobody really bridged up to them after the main front group had formed. If anything, some people got dropped a little bit, and then we saw a chase group come in about a minute and a bit behind the front group. Towards the end of the bike though, Hayden Wild broke away from the front group and came into T2 with a few seconds lead, but that was about it. Other than that there, I think it played out like a draft legal race would have done. But let's say there was no minimum drafting distance, would the fact that in the women's race, so if Kat and Imogen could have worked together, and when they're working, they're really saving each other a lot of energy. They can work a lot harder than one person on their own. Could they have caught Taylor Knibb? Who knows? Would the chase group have caught them? There's more people working together. Would Taylor Knibb have still put more time into the group because maybe it's a bigger group and they don't work so well together? In the men's side, exactly the same thing. A bigger front group, maybe one or two people say, I'm in the front group, I'm not working, I'm just going to sit on the back here. Then there's a bit of, no, you need to, like Ali Brownlee a few years ago, I think about how he absolutely ripped up the rulebook in short course triathlon, and Johnny as well. Absolutely gets me so excited. So I think, wow, well, how could that have been different if it was a fully draft legal race? I think long-term fans of the sport of triathlon don't like draft legal racing or the idea of it for longer distance, because you think, oh, it's just going to be one big pack. But if we think back to how WTCS races used to be, they're better now, but a lot of dead turns, a lot of racing in a car park sort of thing, which just brought the groups together. Now, even in short course, we're seeing more breakaways, more attacks. And I think that the vast majority of courses on the middle and long distance circuit would aid that. They're not going to encourage groups coming together. They're often big loops where you're going to get a long section of a headwind and a long section of a crosswind, a long section of a tailwind. They're long enough that people are having to pace their effort, and perhaps there's terrain that suits one athlete a lot more than another. A climb right at the end, for example, or a climb right at the beginning, a big flat section in the middle. It plays to all these different tactics differently. I wonder if we'd see any team dynamics. Now, I don't know of many teams in triathlon. I know the BMC have a pro-tri squad. I don't think those athletes are expected to do anything for each other in the races, but maybe we'd see more of that. Again, for example, so the women's 70.3 Ironman World Champs this year, Imogen Simmons and Kat Matthews, both sponsored by Canyon, Taylor Knibb sponsored by Trek. Are Canyon going to say, look, work together, catch Taylor Knibb, and one of you win, Canyon as a team, we're really happy? Is that a thing? In the men's race, similar sorts of things, who knows? Would we see Christian Blumenfeld working for Gustav Iden to get him to the front near Sam Laidlow, for example, and then Gustav having fresher legs, being able to then run faster and winning the race? Would we see things like that? I don't know. If we look at the Olympic distance this year, in the Paris Olympics, in the men's race, for example, Sam Dickinson, what he did for Alex Yee's tactics that day were absolutely brilliant. He worked on the bike to keep the pace high, to discourage attacks and to protect Alex, so then Alex would have a better run. He's been applauded for it, and rightfully so. I think we could see more of those sorts of things in the sport of triathlon. I think all of these things would create drama. You would see people not doing the required amount of work to share the load and to work as a team on the bike. You'd see people wanting to win, using their racing acumen to tactically do the best thing for them during that bike leg. I remember seeing, again, Alistair Brownlee, shouting at people on the bike for not pulling through and taking a turn. But then if you're in that athlete's shoes, you're going to be thinking, well, I know Ali Brownlee can run a 29-minute 10K, so I'm going to need to sit on, so I've got a hope in hell of running with the guy. Why not? I love that sort of thing. Again, it might be frustrating and difficult for the athletes to deal with, but I'm a spectator, I'm a fan, I'm consuming the sport. I want to see the drama, I want to see the excitement. We've seen in 2024, the T100 especially, try and dramatise penalties. I think penalties ruin the race. Even a 1 minute penalty, 9 times out of 10, drops the athlete out of the contention for the position they're racing for. People are so good nowadays, it's just so hard to take a minute back on anybody in any discipline. So as soon as I see somebody given a penalty, even though there's a shot of them in the penalty tent and they're stretching and they're ready to go again, I'm just not excited by it. I want to see the athlete in that position in that race, getting the result from their racing acumen and physical ability, not pulled away by a penalty for, I don't know, being 2 centimetres over the dismount line, or rolling into a draft zone for 3 seconds or something. My mind starts going wild with other race dynamics that I think could happen then. So using the T100 as an example, if it was fully draft legal, would we see Lionel Sanders say yes to being offered a spot there or taking a wild card, knowing that potentially him and Sam Long could come out the water together, 2 up TT, are they going to get to the front? Who knows? And even when I'm not stopping thinking about specific situations, I think generally we might see faster swims and definitely faster bikes, because we'll see a lot of people riding really smartly. Even when you ride smartly at 12 and 20 meters, you're still expending more energy than you would be in a bigger group of, say, 6, 8, 10, 12, however many athletes on the bike. So I think we'll see more people coming off the bike together, which is going to then lead to more of a neck and neck, shoulder to shoulder, toe to toe run battle, which of course is where all that excitement comes from, and that head to head comes from. When we see people get off the bike and they're, okay, so-and-so's a minute down on so-and-so, but they're running 10 seconds a mile faster, okay, they're slowly catching them. I know if I was in the race, brilliant, that's really good, but to watch it, it's not that thrilling, I don't think. Only when it gets really close does it get really exciting. 70.3 Worlds this year, Yelly Geens chasing down Hayden Wild. For the first half, it looked like it wasn't going to happen, and then all of a sudden it happened and he was gone. If they'd have come off the bike together, maybe we would have seen it play out differently. Maybe they'd have been toe to toe for longer, who knows? And with regard to the actual cycling speed overall, I don't think it would be any or much slower. If you look at the speeds that the Pro Peloton's doing, and I know they have people working on the front pretty much at all times, I still think they're going to be riding very fast. It might not be exactly the same speed as a time trial bike, but I think they'll be there or thereabouts. So moving on to the product of actually watching the race itself, so commentary and race coverage, general exposure. I think the world of cycling is so much bigger than the world of triathlon, and what this would enable to happen is that the world of cycling might be tempted to watch the world of triathlon, and those worlds might become a lot closer. Reason being, if you're a cyclist and you're watching a triathlon that is draft legal, you can figure out what is happening. You can normally figure out, okay, that's the breakaway, that's the peloton, that's the chase group, or there's some groups in between, or some attacks happening. It's a lot easier to follow. I think commentators have a tough old job. We've seen in 2024 commentary teams getting quite a bit of stick for, they're not covering this right, they don't know about this athlete, they can't see that this is happening. I can't imagine how difficult the job is. I wouldn't wish to have it, that's for sure. So I think that putting them in a better position to be able to tell a better story would be great. If we keep talking about, we need to take triathlon mainstream and get it in front of the masses, you're going to have to align it with a mainstream and masses sport. And still, cycling compared to football is tiny, but it is a lot bigger than triathlon. So I feel like bringing it closer to that world is only going to benefit triathlon. I think we'd see more things that we don't predict. We're not going to know what team tactics are or athletes' tactics are. Now, going into a race, you can pretty much predict that Taylor Knibb is going to ride off the front of the bike leg and be a few minutes ahead coming into T2. You can predict that Magnus Ditlev's going to work hard to close the gap to the front if there is one. You can predict that Sam Laidlow is going to be probably off the front out of transition 1. You can't predict the draft legal nature as much, because athletes will be talking to each other and making plans, because they're all going to want to still win, right? So I just think it's going to create some unpredictable situations. We'll see some athletes who we perhaps not heard of doing really well. We'll see some big upsets, and I think that maybe die-hard fans will think, no, the best athlete should win. I disagree. I think the best athlete on the day, combination of tactics, race prowess and fitness, should win, and whatever makes the biggest story for the sport of triathlon is the best result. Sponsorship is probably the area I have the least amount of knowledge on, so I'm going to keep this quite brief. But if we look at, again, the worlds of triathlon and cycling, for example, athletes at the top end of triathlon are earning a lot of money, and rightfully so. But if I was to say take one of their bike contracts, it's going to be a lot less than a cycling world tour team sponsorship. I know that's a lot different athletes and so on, but I think the money spent on cycling is still a lot more than the money spent on triathlon, and therefore lining those a bit closer together might stand triathlon a better chance of getting more money. And this is mainly driven by the markets, right? So if you're a triathlon brand and you're selling a triathlon bike, you're estimating, okay, if I pay this athlete this, or this person wins this race, how many bikes am I going to sell to triathletes? Well, the market for a triathlon bike is loads smaller than the market for a road bike. We've even seen Specialized pull out of the triathlon bike market in the last few years. So a Sam Laidlow breaking the Kona bike course record on a Canyon Speedmax, brilliant, might have sold some Speedmaxes, but if he did it on an air road, how many air roads would he have sold? Because not everybody's going to be riding a Speedmax every day, whereas you can ride an air road every day. And it's the same for like helmets, skin suits, all that sort of stuff. Sure, you see the pros and athletes with these funky time trial helmets, but how many of those are you really buying? You're probably having, what, one? Maybe a couple of seasons, so one every couple of years. Road helmets, people are going to be buying more and more often. Shoes, socks, all those sorts of things that are more aligned to road cycling, I think the buying market is bigger for, therefore the marketing budget is bigger for. Equipment. Now, I love triathlon for this. There are very few rules in the triathlon world about bikes. You can innovate, you can change things, you can fit things. I know there are more rules creeping in now about fairings and other things, but people seem to be working their way around it quite nicely. I think that would only open the door for more innovation versus the UCI, where you've got road bikes with loads of rules. You've got road bikes with potentially no rules in the triathlon world, and I think that would be brilliant. We'd see athletes who are innovators and early adopters of tech benefit from that, as well as brands benefiting from that as well, and then those things would then be bought by the age groupers, therefore funding the model of triathlon. I remember seeing Sebastian Kienle racing the Norseman, and he had a Scott road bike, put on time trial bars, made it super light with no paint on because the course was really hilly. Now, I'm not suggesting that time trial bars are allowed, but a super light bike for a hilly course, maybe we see that at Nice. But then for a more aero course, do we see a more aero frame and all that sort of thing? I think there's a really endless opportunities. We'll also see a real difference between those who really train their fast aero road position and those who don't. I think pretty much now everybody can get very aero on a time trial bike. It is quite a relaxed, in inverted commas, position once you're used to it, whereas holding an aero position on a road bike takes real dedication and cannot be done straight away, and definitely can't be held for 112 miles, I don't think. So I think we'd see a lot of variations between who's really drilled and dialed and who isn't. So what does this mean for age group racing? Well, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I've racked my brains and I don't really know, and I guess that's where I sort of throw it over to you lot if this was to be the case. I don't think that having a big pack of amateur athletes in a triathlon is sensible on the bike. It probably will lead to a lot of crashes. However, who's to say that's what's actually going to happen? And we see at big races now that happens anyway, and regardless of what bike you're on. So I'm not really sure. I feel like age group athletes need to follow the same rules as pro athletes, ride the same bikes for all the reasons that I've already said, and so you feel like you're doing the same sport, albeit a lot slower in my case, but to be doing the same thing. So I'd have to say draft legal. We see a lot more races nowadays being time trial starts, so maybe there wouldn't be as much bunching up on the bike because the field is more spread out, and especially over the full distance, people are swimming for between 50 minutes and 2 hours 20, so there's a long window there. So perhaps it's the same, but maybe not. I have also thought about whether we could do something like how this short course racing used to be, where you could have little stubby aero bars, but you can only go on them if you're on the front of a group or solo. That could be an option. I think the biggest benefit to age groupers for an outcome like this, though, would be that it's more accessible to go out and buy a road bike and a time trial bike, because generally speaking, people riding in groups ride on road bikes, and riding alone you ride on time trial bikes. So I think most triathletes would have both. Maybe not all of them, I know. Some people might race and train exclusively on a triathlon bike, but I definitely started road cycling before I started triathlon, so I had to go out and buy another bike. If I didn't have to buy another bike, maybe I'd have started triathlon a bit earlier. Maybe I'd have done more events because I've not laid out the money for for an expensive triathlon bike. I think that's a real opportunity to make the sport more accessible to more people, because that in itself feeds that pro level top. If you get the bottom of the pyramid wider and wider, and millions of people are doing triathlon, the top is also going to be higher quality and more people in it. So I think that That would help event organisers out as well as the pro ranks out in time to come. I look at sports like World Rallying and Formula One that use team, strategy, tech, football that use team, strategy, tech, and pro cycling which uses team, strategy and tech, and I just think we could apply this to the sport of triathlon. Let's take triathlon to the next level, let's get the sport appealing to a mass market, mainstream, wide audience, and let's get more people doing the sport. Draft League or triathlon, please.